Hello everyone, welcome again. Welcome to Charuchi classes. So in this lecture we are going to read lesson 17, that is India under the Delhi Sultanate of Tamil Nadu board class 11 history. So in this lecture we are going to see everything under the Delhi Sultanate. So let us start the reading. First is about the administration during the Delhi Sultanate. So first is the establishment and the expansion of the Delhi Sultanate led to the evolution of a powerful and efficient administrative system, and at its zenith the authority of Delhi Sultan had extended as far south as Madurai. Although the Delhi Sultanate had disintegrated, their administrative system made a powerful impact on the Indian provincial kingdoms and later on the Mughal system of administration. So the Delhi Sultanate was an Islamic state with its religion Islam, and the sultans considered themselves as the representatives of the caliph, and they included the name of caliph in the khutbah or the prayer and inscribed it on their coins. Although Balban called himself the shadow of God, he continued to practice of including the name of caliph in the khutbah and the coins, and Iltutmish, Muhammad bin Tughlaq and Firoz Tughlaq obtained Mansur or the letter of permission from the caliph, and the office of sultan was the most important in the administrative system, and he was the ultimate authority for military, legal and political activities, and there was no clear law of succession during this period. Remember, there was no clear law of succession during this period, and all the sons had equal claim to the thrones, and Iltutmish even nominated his daughter in the preference to his sons. But such nominations or successions were to be accepted by the nobles, and sometimes ulemas played crucial role in accepting succession to the throne. However, the military superiority remained the main factor in the matters of succession. Now something about the central government. So the Sultan was assisted by a number of departments and officials in his administration. So the post of Naib was the most powerful one, and the Naib practically enjoyed all the parts of Sultan and exercised general control over all the departments, and next to him was the Wazir, who was heading the finance department called Diwan-e-Wizarat. Remember, Wazir was heading the finance department called Diwani-Wizarat. Now the military department was called Diwani-Aris. Remember, finance department was called as Diwani-Wizarat and was headed by Wazir, whereas the military department was called Diwani-Aris and it was headed by Aris-e-Mamlik. Remember, military department Diwani-Aris was headed by Aris-e-Mamlik. Now, he was responsible for recruiting the soldiers and administering the military departments, and he was not the commander-in-chief of army. The Sultan himself was the commander-in-chief of army. Remember, the Aris-e-Mamlik was not the commander-in-chief, whereas the Sultan himself was the commander-in-chief of army, and the military department was first set up by Balban, and it was further improved by Alauddin Khalji, under whom the strength of the army crossed 3 lakh soldiers. Alauddin introduced the system of branding of horses that we have already seen in the last chapter, and payment of salary in the cash, and cavalry was given importance under the Delhi Sultanate. Again of Hulia also we have seen in the last chapter. So now Diwani Rasalat was the department of religious affairs. Remember, you may get these questions to in the match the following. So you have to remember the Diwani Rasalat was the department of the religious affairs, military department was Diwani Aris, and the finance department was Diwani Wizarat. Remember, Wazir and then Wizarat, and the main important department was finance department. Then again another department was the military department, was called Diwani Aris. First is Wazir, now Aris headed by the Aris-e-Mamlik. Third is the Diwani Rasalat, which is department of religious affairs, and it was headed by Chief Sadar. Remember, Chief Sadar. And the grants were made by this department for the construction of maintenance of the mosque, pumps and madrasas, and the head of the judicial department was Chief Qazi. Remember, head of the judicial department was Chief Qazi, and other judges or the Qazis were appointed in various parts of the Sultanate, and the Muslim personal law or the Sharia was followed in the civil matters. Remember, Sharia was followed in the civil matters during the period of Delhi Sultanate, and the Hindus were governed by their own personal law and their cases were dispensed by village panchayats. Now the criminal law was based on the rules and the regulations made by the sultans, and the department of correspondence was called Diwani Insha. All the correspondence between the ruler and the officials was dealt with by this department. Now something about the local administration. The provinces under the Delhi Sultanate was called the Iktas. Remember, the provinces under the Delhi Sultanate was called as Iktas, and they were initially under the control of nobles, but the governors of the provinces were called Muktis or Walis. Remember, Muktis or the Walis. So the provinces were called as Iktas, and the governors of these Iktas were known as Muktis or the Walis, and they were to maintain law and order and collect the land revenues, and the provinces were divided. These provinces were divided into sheikhs, and the next division was Pargana. So first the provinces, these are called as Iktas, then their governors are called as Muktis and Walis, and these provinces were again divided into sheikhs, and these sheikhs were again divided into parganas. Now the sheikh was under the control of sheikhdar. Sheikh was under the control of sheikhdars, and the parganas comprising the number of villages. So parganas again divided into number of villages, and these villages were are headed by the amils, whereas the village remained the basic unit of the administration. So the basic unit was village, then comes pargana, then comes sheikhs, and then comes muktis. So muktis are nothing but the provinces. So the village accountant was called patwari, and the village headman was known as Mukaddam or the Chaudhary. Remember, the village headman was known as the Mukaddam or Chaudhary, and the village accountant was called as Patwari. Even nowadays, there are these Patwari were known as different, the different name in the different states. Like in Maharashtra, these Patwari are known as the Talati, and there are different names that we have already discussed. We are going to you must have studied in the polity lectures or polity. So next is the economy. So after the consolidating their positions in India, the Delhi Sultans introduced reforms in the land revenue administration, and the lands were classified into three categories. These lands were categorized into three categories. First is Ikka land, then Khalisa land, and then Inam lands. Now concentrate here. Ikta lands are the lands assigned to the officials as Iktas instead of payment for their service. Remember, these were the lands assigned to the officials as Iktas instead of the payment of their services. Now next is the Khalisa land. These are the lands which are under the direct control of the Sultan, and the revenue collected were spent for the maintenance of the royal courts and the royal households. Now, these are third is the Inam land, and these lands are assigned or granted to religious leaders or the religious institutions. Now, something about the peasantry. So, the peasantry paid 1/3 of their produce. Remember, the 1/3 of their produce as land revenue, and sometimes even 1/2 of the produce. So, they also paid other taxes and always led hand to mouth living. So peasants' conditions was not good during the Delhi Sultanate, and frequent famines were made their lives more miserable. However, sultans like Muhammad bin Tughlaq and Firoz Tughlaq took efforts to enhance agricultural production by providing irrigation facilities and by providing Kavi loans. What do you mean by Kavi loans? That we have already discussed in the last chapter. So they also encouraged the farmers to cultivate superior crops like wheat instead of barley, and Firoz encouraged the growth of horticulture. Muhammad bin Tughlaq created a separate agriculture department known as Diwan-e-Kohi. Remember, this Diwan-e-Kohi is a department of agriculture. Now, during the Sultanate period, the process of urbanization gained momentum and a number of cities and towns had grown during this period, and Lahore, Multan, Broch, Anhilwara, Lucknowti, Daulatabad, Delhi and Janapur were the important among them, and Delhi remained the largest city in the east. Now, the growth of trade and commerce was described by contemporary writers, and India exported a large number of commodities to the countries on the Persian Gulf and West Asia and also to Southeast Asian countries. Overseas trade was under the control of Multanis and Afghan Muslims, and inland trade was dominated by Gujarat Marwari merchants and Muslim Bohra merchants. Remember, inland trade during the time of the Delhi Sultanate was dominated by Gujarat Marwari merchants and Muslim Bohra merchants. Now, the construction of roads and their maintenance facilitated for smooth transport and communication. Particularly, the royal roads were kept in good shape, and sarais or the rest houses on the highways were maintained for convenience of the travelers. Remember, sarais or the rest sarais are nothing but the rest houses, and they were on the highways and they were maintained for convenience of the traveler. So next is cotton textile and the silk industry. So cotton textile and the silk industry flourished in this period, and sericulture was introduced on a large scale, which made India less dependent on other countries for import of the raw silk. And the paper industry had grown, and there was an extensive use of paper from 14th and the 15th century, and other crafts like leather making, metal crafts, carpet weaving flourished due to the increasing demand. And the royal karkhanas supplied the goods needed to the sultan and his household, and they manufactured costly articles made of gold, silver and goldware. So the nobles also aped the lifestyle of sultans and indulged in luxurious life, and they were well paid and accumulated enormous wealth. Now, the system of coinage had also developed during the Delhi Sultanate, and Iltutmish issued the several types of the silver takas, and one silver takas was divided into 48 beetles. Remember, one silver taka was divided into 48 beetles during the Khalji rule and 50 beetles during the Tughlaq rule. Now, the gold coins, or also known as dinars, became popular during the reign of Alauddin Khilji after his South Indian conquest, and the copper coins were less in number and dateless. And the Muhammad bin Tughlaq had not only experimented token currency but also issued several types of the gold and the silver coins, and they were minted at 8 different places. Remember, these coins were minted at 8 different places, and at least 25 varieties of the gold coins were issued by Muhammad bin Tughlaq. Now, something about the social life. So, there was a little change in structure of the Hindu society during this period, and the traditional caste system with the Brahmins on the upper strata of the society was prevalent during that time also, and the subservient position of the women also continued, and the practice of sati was widely prevalent, and the seclusion of women and the wearing of parda became common among the upper class women. Remember, parda system and seclusion of the woman became common among the upper class of the women during the Delhi Sultanate period, and the Arabs and the Turks brought the parda system into India, and it became the widespread among the Hindu women in the upper classes of the North India. Remember, parda system was brought by the Arabs and the Turks, and this system became widespread among the Hindu women in the upper caste of the North India. Even this system is being practiced even now also. This system is being practiced in some parts of our country. Anyways, moving forward, during the Sultanate period, the Muslim society remained divided into several ethnic and racial groups, and the Turks, Iranians, Afghans and Indian Muslims developed exclusively, and there were no intermarriages between these groups. Remember, the Turks, Iranians and Afghans and the Indian Muslims developed exclusively, and there were no intermarriages between these groups. Now, Hindu converts from lower caste were also not given respect. Remember, Hindu converts from lower caste were also not given equal respect, and the Muslim nobles occupied high offices, and very rarely the Hindu nobles were given high positions in the government. Now the Hindus were considered Jimmis. Remember, Hindus were considered as Jimmis or the protected people. What do you mean by Jimmis? Jimmis means protected people for which they were forced to pay a tax, and that tax is known as jizya. And in the beginning, the jizya was collected as a part of land tax, and Firoz Tughlaq separated it from the land revenue and collected jizya as a separate tax. So who separated this tax? He was Firoz Tughlaq. Now sometimes Brahmins were exempted from paying jizya. Now something about the art and architecture during the Delhi Sultanate. So the art and the architecture of the Delhi Sultanate period was distinct from the Indian style, and the Turks introduced the arches. Remember, the Turks who introduced the arches, domes and lofty towers or the minarets. These were introduced by the Turks. So the Turks introduced arches, domes, lofty towers and minarets and decoration using the Arabic script, and they used the skill of the Indian stone cutters, and they also added color to their buildings by using the marbles, red and the yellow sandstones. Here you will see the image of Quwat-ul-Islam mosques. So in the beginning, they converted temples and other structures demolished into mosques. For example, this Quwat al-Islam mosque near Qutub Minar in Delhi was built by the materials obtained from destroying the many Hindu and Jain temples, but later they began to construct new structures, and the most magnificent building of the 13th century was Qutub Minar, which was founded by the Aybak and completed by the Iltutmish. This 71-meter tower was dedicated to the Sufi saint Qutbuddin Bakhtiyar Khaki, and the balconies of this tower were projected from the main building, and it was the proof of architectural skills of the period. And later, Alauddin Khilji added the entrance to the Qutub Minar called Alai Darwaza. The dome of this arch was built on the scientific lines. Now, the building of the Tughlaq period were constructed by the combining arch and the dome, and they also used the cheaper and easily available grey color stone, and the palace complex called Tughlaqabad with its beautiful lake was built during the period of Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq. Now, the Muhammad bin Tughlaq built the tomb of Ghiyasuddin on the high platform, and the Kotla fort at Delhi was the creation of Firoz Tughlaq. Now, the Lodi garden in Delhi was the example of the architecture of Lodi. Remember, the Lodi garden of Delhi was the example of the architecture of the Lodi, and the Kotla fort at Delhi was the creation of Firoz Tughlaq. Now something about the music. So new musical instruments such as sarangi and rabab. Remember, rabab is the musical instrument. Sarangi was also musical instrument, and these were introduced during this period. So Amir Khusro introduced many new ragas. Remember, Amir Khusro introduced many new ragas such as Ghora and Sanam. So let me ask you, these ragas were introduced by whom? So Ghora and Sanam were the ragas which were introduced by Amir Khusro, and he evolved a new style of light music known as Qawwali. So who evolved a new style of light music known as Qawwali? So he was Amir Khusro. So by blending the Hindu and the Iranian system, Amir Khusro evolved new style of light music, and that is known as Qawwali. Now the invention of sitar was also attributed to Amir Khusro. Remember, invention of sitar was also attributed to Amir Khusro. And the Indian classical work Raga Darpan. Remember, the Indian classical work Raga Darpan was translated into Persian during the reign of Firoz Tughlaq. Now the Pir Bodhan, remember his name, Pir Bodhan, a Sufi saint, was one of the great musicians of this period, and the Raja Man Singh of Gwalior was the great lover of music. Raja Man Singh of Gwalior was great lover of music, and he encouraged the composition of a great musical work called Man Kutuhal. Remember, he encouraged the composition of the great musical work called Man Kutuhal. Now something about the literature during this period. So the Delhi Sultanate and Delhi Sultans patronized learning and the literature. Many of them had great love for Arabic and Persian literature, and learned men came from Persia, and Persian language got encouragement from the rulers. Besides theology and poetry, the writings of the history was also encouraged. Some of sultans had their own court historians, and the most famous historians of this period were Hassan Nizami, Minazur Siraj, Ziauddin Barani, and Shams Siraj Afif. Remember their names, I am going to read it. Again, the famous historians of Delhi Sultanate period were Hassan Nizami, Minaz-uz-Siraj, Ziauddin Barani, and Shams Siraj Afif. Now the Baranis, Tariq-e-Firoz Shahi. Tariq-e-Firoz Shahi contains the history of Tughlaq dynasty, and it is written by Barani. Now the Minaz-uz-Siraj wrote Tabaqat-e-Nasri. Remember, Tariq-e-Firoz Shahi. Tariq-e-Firoz Shahi was written by Barani. Now Minaz-uz-Siraj was Minaz-uz-Siraj wrote Tabaqat-e-Nasri. So Tabaqat-e-Nasri is written by Minaz-uz-Siraj, which is a general history of Muslim dynasties up to 1260. So who wrote Tabaqat-e-Nasri? It is written by Minaz-uz-Siraj, and what it contains, it is basically a general history of Muslim dynasty. So what do you know about the Tariq-e-Firoz Shahi? Tariq-e-Firoz Shahi contains the history of Tughlaq dynasty, and it was written by Barani. So next is something about Amir Khusro. So Amir Khusro was the famous Persian writer of this period, and he wrote a number of poems. He experimented with the several poetical forms and created a new style of Persian poetry called Sabaq-e-Hind or Indian style. Remember, who created a new style of Persian poetry which is called as Sabaq-e-Hind? He was Amir Khusro. Amir Khusro created new style of Persian poetry which was known as Sabaq-e-Hind. Remember Sabaq-e-Hind, Amir Khusro. Sabaq-e-Hind, Amir Khusro. Sabaq-e-Hind, Amir Khusro. Yes. Now he also wrote some Hindi verses. Amir Khusro's Khazain-ul-Futuh speaks about Alauddin conquest. Remember Khazain-ul-Futuh, which is also written by Amir Khusro, speaks about Alauddin conquest. Khazain-ul-Futuh, written by Amir Khusro, talks about Alauddin conquest. Now his famous work Tughlaq-Nama was again written by the Amir Khusro. This Tughlaq-Nama deals with the rise of Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq. Tughlaq-Nama deals with the rise of the Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq. Now Sanskrit and Persian functioned as link languages in the Delhi Sultanate, and Zia Naqshbandi was the first to translate Sanskrit stories into Persian. Remember his name, Zia Naqshbandi. They may ask you who was the first to translate the Sanskrit stories into the Persian. He was Zia Naqshbandi. Remember his name. Zia Naqshbandi was the first to translate the Sanskrit stories into Persian. Who was the first to translate the Sanskrit stories into Persian? He was, yes, Zia Naqshbandi. Now the book Tutunama, or the book of the parrot, became the popular and translated into Turkish and later into many European languages, and the famous Raj-e-Tarangini, which was written by the Kalhana, belonged to the period of Zain-ul-Abidin, the ruler of Kashmir. So Zain-ul-Abidin was the ruler of Kashmir, and during his period famous Raj-e-Tarangini was written, and this Raj-e-Tarangini was written by Kalhana. Remember Raj-e-Tarangini, Kalhana, and during the period of the Kashmir ruler whose name was Zain-ul-Abidin. And many Sanskrit works on the medicine and music were translated into Persian. Now in Arabic, Al-Baruni's Kitab-ul-Hind. Who wrote Al-Kitab-ul-Hind? It was written by Al-Baruni, and it is the most famous work, and the regional languages also developed during this period. Now the Chand Baradi was the famous Hindi poet of this period. Chand Baradi. Remember the name Chand Baradi was the famous Hindi poet of this period. They may ask you who was the famous Hindi period during the Delhi Sultanate period. So he was Chand Baradi. Now Bengali literature had also developed the Nusrat Shah. Bengali literature had also developed Nusrat Shah patronized the translation of Mahabharata into Bengali. So the Bengali literature was developed during this time, and Nusrat Shah patronized the translation. So who patronized the translation of Mahabharata into Bengali? He was Nusrat Shah. And the Bhakti cult led to development of Gujarati and the Marathi language. So the Bhakti cult, which cult led to the development of Gujarati and the Marathi language? It was Bhakti cult. Now the Vijayanagar Empire patronized the Telugu and the Kannada literature. Now remember, Vijayanagar Empire patronized the Telugu and the Kannada literature. So with this we have come to an end of this chapter. So do hit the like button and do subscribe to our channel for more updates. Thank you.